Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And a quick heads up, over the next few weeks, I'm going to need you all because I've got a call to arms for all listeners because I've got a bit of nervous excitement going on at the moment. Because my first book just appeared on the page of the huge book publisher website, Simon & Schuster. And I've got to admit, I'm incredibly excited to get my first book out there after being approached by a publisher, but equally nervous that I'll get those dreaded trolling reviews and all that and end up wondering, what have I unleashed on myself? So the book is due out on May the 5th, and if you do pick it up, a nice review would be appreciated. It's called Great TED Talks Innovation. Essentially, I've watched hundreds and hundreds of TED Talks over the years, and I tried to get all the ones about innovation together and then put them into a format where anybody can pick it up and learn how to innovate. But you didn't tune in to hear me harping on about my own book. So today I want to delve back into the world of artificial intelligence because for many businesses, early successful use of artificial intelligence centered on automation has been a mindset for many years. And I think it's been reinforced by that simple yet popular commercial narrative where increasing AI will reduce labour costs. But thankfully, despite that, the understanding is there are limits to that approach and it's growing. I'm a bit late to the party, but I recently discovered Fjord, and they're a design and innovation consultancy for Accenture Interactive. And they believe the next step for AI is a generation of systems that blend with human intelligence to actually empower people to cope with the increasing complexity in the workplace, but ultimately enhance the human experience. And that is a much more positive narrative that I can buy into. So essentially, businesses are starting to reposition their thinking and reimagine how design AI for human intelligence can be achieved. So today I invited Connor Upton, and he's the Group Design Director at Fjord, based at Accenture's Global Innovation Hub in Dublin. And I want to explore that topic further with him today. And he is an expert in human-centric design, and he also has 15 years' experience in cognitive systems engineering and designing interactive products. He's an incredibly cool guy, and I'm quite excited to get him on here today. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can virtually beam your ears all the way to Dublin to speak with Connor now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Connor. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Neil. My name's Connor Upton. I'm the Group Design Director of Fjord in Dublin. We're a design practice that sits within Accenture's Global Innovation Hub. And as a Group Design Director, I'm responsible for the craft and the practice of design across all of the innovation projects that we run. And those deal with many, many different industries, everything from life sciences to public safety to financial services.
Fantastic. And before you came on, I must admit, I didn't know too much about Fjord. And when I did a little bit of research, I quickly learned that it was the design and innovation consultancy within Accenture Interactive that brings breakthrough connected products and services to life by trying to redesign people's relationship with the world around them. But can you set the scene and tell me a little bit more about exactly what it is you guys do and the kind of problems you solve for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, we are a global organization. It's pretty astounding. There's now nearly 1,200 designers that we have within the organization, and that's spread across nearly 30 studios around the world. So there's obviously differences in regional focuses, but I think the core of our business is really built around three pillars of work. First of all, we conduct research and strategy development in areas like employee experience and customer experience. Something that we've been pursuing a lot is this idea of mindsets. So we've provided clients with mindsets insights around things like the future of mobility, the future of home, rituals about money and money behaviors. So that's the first one. The second thing we do is we do service and systems design. And this is really about supporting digital transformation programs. So again, huge variety in where we've applied this. We've had projects in our innovation center, which looked at things like how to support refugees with identity management. And then, even things like with heavy industry, how to manage a digital mine, how to bring that level of automation into those types of dangerous environments. And the third then is around product and experience design. And this is really where we get into building the applications, the experiences, the tangible products for both consumers and also for specialist workers. So again, that will be things like, virtual agents within banking, all the way through to, we've a really interesting group that look at designing specialist medical devices. So really, it's a very, very kind of broad set of practices we do.
And one thing that really stood out when I was researching you was I quickly learned that you've got over 15 years experience research and designing interactive products. So I've got to ask, what have been the biggest changes that you've seen throughout your career? I mean, I suspect that everything that's happening now is a huge thing that will probably have a long-lasting impact. But what have been the biggest changes that you've seen?
Yeah, I think the changes are, they're huge. The way that technology has evolved over the last 20 years has been incredible, but also even our own attitudes to products and the world. I think really the main thing is this shift from like designing discrete objects or discrete experiences, what we would call a product, and that move then to designing services that help people get their jobs done. And now what I think we're seeing more is the design of systems that support groups of people or organizations or communities to achieve goals. I think that's a big kind of mind shift. It's interesting. I met with we worked with one of our partners, an advertising group recently, and we talked about how, 20 years ago, people, the whole objective of, say, graphic design was to make people want stuff. And then with the growth of digital products, that wasn't enough. The digital products are easy to pick up or get rid of. So we actually had to make stuff that people wanted. And that had this big shift then towards user experience, how to design an app or a digital product that somebody really wanted to use. And I think more recently, we're now seeing this other shift, which is how do we make systems that support broader goals? So things that are more holistic, more conscientious. Like if you look at platforms like Google, or if you look at any large organization, any data-driven organization that's built around, shared data sources, we're really designing interconnected systems. They're quite complex. They work very fast. They use technologies like artificial intelligence. But the real move is this move from designing for individuals to designing for groups. We've talked about that within our Fjord trends with the trend life-centered design, this whole shift from me to we. And that's both reflecting how products change, but really reflecting how society is changing in terms of its views as well.
And for many businesses, I think early successful use of artificial intelligence often centered on automation, which created this whole commercial narrative where increasing AI will reduce labor costs. But I'm curious, are you finding that people are beginning to understand that there are limits to that approach, especially with a more proactive mindset? You would automatically assume that a hybrid approach can leverage the best of AI and humans to move quicker alongside one another. But I'm curious, are you seeing that different approach?
Yeah, to be upfront, like there is lots of stuff out there that should be automated.
Yeah.
None of us want to be knitting our own socks, and similarly, none of us want to be, filtering our own spam on our email accounts. So there's loads of space there for applying AI in these automation spaces. But I think we're starting to realize more and more that artificial intelligence automates tasks, not jobs. Because tasks are really well described, they're bounded functions, but most work isn't really like this. A lot of work is a lot messier. There tends to be undescribed work that's really valuable. So the human glue that holds businesses together. Work is a social place. So while AI will help with automation, there are places where that is not going to be enough. The other thing is then people are realizing that AI comes with operational costs as well. So it's not a tech product that you plug in and just have it up and running.
Yeah.
It's about models, and these machine learning models have to be sustained over time, generally by people who cost a lot more than people who are doing procedural jobs and who may not want to do that, may not want to maintain a model long term. So one of the things we've been looking at is, how do you shift that responsibility for maintaining, enhancing these models to frontline workers, to the people who are doing the job in the first place. And then I suppose there's a third aspect as well then, which is efficiency versus resilience, because AI is speeding things up a lot. And when you speed things up, you're forced to face issues that previously you might have handled in a much more discretionary manner. So we've all heard about algorithmic bias, or how AI can lead to biased outcomes. We've seen examples of that where AI has codified or amplified racial or gender biases because of the training data it was fed on. And it's not that these things can't be tackled. It's not that we can design solutions that will help try and limit the bias, or at least identify it. But it's more that we can reveal biases in data, but it actually requires people to sit down and actually talk about it and understand what are the goals that we want to achieve, rather than, what's the historic things we've seen in the data beforehand. So, you were talking about the limits of an automation mindset or approach. I think those three things are some of the limits that we're starting to see at the moment.
And you're starting to see those limits at the moment. But looking forward, and let's look beyond the pandemic that we're all experiencing at the moment, how urgently do you think organizations need to actually rethink their overall approach to AI and move away from just adoption into that long-term strategic implementation at scale? Because I suspect at the moment, nobody's thinking that, but how urgent does it need to be?
It really depends on where a business sits on its maturity, on its digital transformation journey. So, like I said, there's still loads of tasks out there that should be automated. And, for a lot of companies who haven't made the shift to being data driven, they need to embark on some automation projects just to get their data infrastructure in place and to have the systems in place to really help them leverage AI in a different manner. But when I say a different manner, when you just look at AI with an automation mindset, automation is based on a cost reduction approach. It's about reducing costs, improving efficiencies. But we've heard a lot about how powerful artificial intelligence is as a technology. So if it's that powerful, I suppose what we've been proposing is, how can it actually support a growth mindset? How can we actually use it to generate net new value, not just remove costs? And this is really what the designing intelligence trend, that's part of our Trends Report 2020, focuses on. So in it, we talk about, how can we use AI to help executives envision new strategies, new services, new products? How can we use AI to empower workers who are coping with increasing levels of complexity in their day-to-day work? And also, how can we use it to enhance the human experience? How can we use it to give people new capabilities that they just wouldn't have on their own? So how can we augment their existing practices? And each of those things, this isn't about automation. This is really about getting the best value out of blending human intelligence and artificial intelligence to achieve goals.
And like you said a few moments ago, AI automates tasks, not jobs. So rather than replace people, the real value that I think increasingly people are seeing is humans and AI working together. But do you have any examples or any insights on how you see that approach enhancing the human experience too?
Yeah, so like when we talk about enhancing human experience, we're talking about, like I said, giving people capabilities that they just don't have on their own. So as a technology, sometimes artificial intelligence, it's a very big term. It's used for many, many different things. But I've seen it, the way I see it in terms of enhancement, it can act as a perceptual accelerator. It can extend our perceptual capabilities. There's some really nice examples of Google experiments that are out there. One that I particularly love is about, how a bunch of scientists trained a model to understand and differentiate between different bird songs. Okay, so thousands of bird songs were trained into this model, and now when you play a bird song, the model can tell you what bird it is. Now that might seem like, kind of frivolous, but when you think about like the application of something like that, if you think about things like environmental surveys, if you want to conduct an environmental survey, it would require people going out into the field. Very expensive, not very accurate because birds don't want to be caught. If you had a model like that, you could actually place mics out into a vast environment, smart microphones with the model built into it that would actually detect that information. That's enhancing a human capability. But other examples, I suppose, from our own portfolio, we did a project a year ago now, I think. It was for Velux, the company that produces skylights. The project was called My Daylight. And when you think about a skylight, it's kind of an interesting product because it's probably one of the few products that, to understand if you need it, you need to bash a big hole in the roof of your house and then put it in. So the pain point for customers is, what's it going to look like? So what we did was we found a way of, we developed an application that incorporated computer vision, a physics modeling engine to model light, and augmented reality that will allow someone stand in their attic, click out the measurements, and then actually virtually place the skylights in that space, and then see what a difference that daylight would make. So if you think about the enhancement that gives them the power to see three-dimensional space with the same vision as, say, an architect or a interior designer. And that's a capability that they just could not have without using a technology like this.
And if we dare to look even further forward, how do you eventually see that empowering people in complex systems and ultimately driving that trust in AI too?
Yeah, I think empowerment is really important, because a lot of the times people see AI as this discretionary technology that you put in. But where people have to work alongside it, trust is really important. And I think a nice example, again, a project that we did at the DOC, Accenture's Global Innovation Center, where I'm based. We ran a project last year called Last Mile Delivery. And what it looked to do was it looked to empower postal workers to try and achieve same-day delivery. So if you think about national postal services, they're in an interesting space right now because their business model is a little bit Victorian. It's kind of like built around the idea of putting a letter to your letterbox once a day. And that's not really what people expect anymore. People expect fast, flexible delivery of packages basically to wherever they are, basically as quickly as it can get there. So if you're a national postal service and you've got an existing workforce and existing infrastructure, you have those assets at hand. But how do you actually allow a very formal, long-established business to really accelerate? We looked at the problem and we looked at how you could bring in machine learning models, so artificial intelligence that could do things like predict demand and understand where that demand would be across a city. And then also do things like route planning and route optimization to essentially say, this is the fastest way of picking up these products and getting them to the people who want them. And this is essentially the idea of shifting from this once a day to a continuous collection and delivery model. Now, the key to this is if you've got an existing workforce, particularly a workforce that may be resistant to change or change, like dramatic change in through technology like this, how do you ensure that you give them this incredibly powerful advisor as an advisor, as a tool, not as essentially a dictator? Because the model doesn't know everything about the world. You could have a very experienced delivery agent who knows a shortcut or knows a route that they can take or couldn't take, or maybe the car breaks down when they're in the middle of a delivery. The AI can't know that unless you set up the interactions in such a way that people can provide that information back. So we took great care when we were designing the mobile application to allow people to provide feedback in the moment in terms of what they were able to do, what they weren't able to do. And through simple on-screen interactions with essentially what looked like a Gantt chart that allowed them to show their journeys. We were able to translate that human feedback into machine-readable instructions that the model could then take on board and quickly respond to, and maybe plan a route a little bit differently, and over time learn about these nuances that people are experiencing out in the real world. So this is really about where we can set up these systems so that people can build trust in them over time and continue to train and direct them over time.
And on this podcast over the last few weeks, I've had an increasing number of people and businesses that are using AI to enhance their creativity. For example, I've had people creating music through artificial intelligence, and an entire album, and also art that's gone on to be featured in galleries. And also, finally, there was Adobe, who are using artificial intelligence to cut back on all those repetitive processes and let the AI take care of that. So, do you think designers will naturally increasingly turn to AI to envision and develop their new products and services by enhancing human creativity rather than replace it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, designers are a fairly diverse bunch. We have people who are more interested in the research aspect. We have some people who are more interested in the technological aspect. But by and large, I think designers are very pragmatic. And when early in my career, when I was a web designer, I started with graphic designing training, but I learned to code because code was the building block that would help drive my designs. It made me a better designer. And I think at the same time, a lot of designers are now starting to experiment with artificial intelligence. Within our own team, we've had some really nice kind of playful examples and experiments. One of our designers put together a workshop to help people figure out and play with the technology. So he put together a workshop called Neural Hip Hop, where in the space of an hour, people were able to get hands-on with a machine learning model where they could train the model on their favorite music artist, and then get the algorithm to generate or suggest new song lyrics, and then they had to take those song lyrics and tweak them and improve them and then perform them. This was all part of the workshop. So people are really starting to play around with it. We also had another designer who got an AI to write a joke book. We've had other designers who are exploring the idea of generative brands, where you don't design the specifics of the brand, but you set up a set of different parameters around color palettes, around different types of shapes and forms, and you get the algorithm to generate out various different options and get inspired by it, find things that you wouldn't have thought up yourself. So yeah, I think lots of people are doing it. We've also got some famous pioneers. So Philippe Starck, who's kind of a very well-known designer, recently did a collaboration with Autodesk where he used one of their generative design applications to design a set of chairs. We've also seen examples of people using that to design more efficient parts for vehicles. So yeah, I think people are starting to see the potential with it. And then on top of that, the barrier to entry has really, really dropped. It used to be you had to have significant experience with statistical modeling, with data engineering in order to be able to use artificial intelligence. But now with things like Runway ML, the new TensorFlow 2, and applications like Google Lens, it's much, much easier for people who are not coming from an engineering background to actually just start to experiment with it.
And obviously, I'm locked down here in Birmingham at the moment. You're in Dublin locked down. And I do kind of feel that all over the world, we're all working from home for, 2-3 months. And we're starting to think differently, work differently, and question things now. So I think on the other side of this, things are going to be very, very different. And to hit the ground running, people are going to need a new mindset. So my final question to you is, how can businesses go about shifting their mindset to no longer just thinking about AI as an automation solution, to then going on and exploring the art of the possible with it too?
Yeah, I think I think key to this is to stop thinking about AI as a discrete technology, and actually take a much more systemic view. Consider how people are going to interact with it. I mean, I think most people who've worked have had that experience of, they've ended up working with that antisocial genius, the person who's brilliant at their job, but really you can't really collaborate with them.
Yeah.
And for managers who have people like that, sometimes you kind of go, is it worth it? Because if you set up the work in the right way, you can let them at it. But work is more than that. And often that individual will not have the full range of skills that are needed to try and produce a meaningful outcome. And the reality is AI, if you design it incorrectly, is that antisocial genius. It can be a dictator. So we have started to evolve our own practice within Fjord as a design organization. We're well known for systems design, which is a very much a focus on a customer experience or an employee experience. We've now elevated this to systems design, where we take steps where, first of all, we map out an existing system, and we map it out in order to see, actually, if you're thinking about bringing in artificial intelligence, where is the right place to bring it in here? And then once you've got that map, you can actually start to see, well, what are the upstream and downstream consequences of bringing in AI that might actually accelerate the process here? And who are the people that will have to interact with it? How is that work currently done? What workers are going to be involved with it in the future? And key to this as well then is, if you design your artificial intelligence as a teammate, then you can start to think about, well, what are the interactions that we have to provide people? How can people observe what the AI is doing and understand it? How can they direct it if it starts to go wrong, or if we need to set a new goal for it? And how can it take that direction on board as feedback and learn and improve over the time? And this is two-way. I think we can learn. Novices going into a domain can learn if we've got a very well-trained artificial intelligence. It can actually help them learn about a system as well. So I think that is probably, to me, the key shift in people's mindsets around AI. Start to design it as a team player and start to think about where it fits into an overall system, rather than just thinking about it as a technology that you go to your data science team to try and get an answer for.
Well, a huge thank you for coming on the podcast today. So many great insights there. But before I do let you go, could I just ask that you remind everyone listening where they can find you guys online and some of the work that you're doing, and also contact your team if they are left with any questions about our conversation today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on Twitter, at Fjord is the handle. If people want to find out more around our strategy work, we have published our trends report, Fjord Trends 2020. That's available at trends.fjordnet.com. Another channel that I would encourage people to look at, we have a channel on Medium called Design Voices, where a lot of our designers put their writings forward, and we will be releasing a lot of work on designing intelligence and this role of design and AI in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, I mean, if people want to get in touch, probably the best, I publish on LinkedIn from time to time. It's probably the best way to reach me.
Cool. Well, I'll add all those links to the show notes and the blog post that accompanies this episode. And I meant what I said a few moments ago. Loved having you on here today. And that line you mentioned pretty early on in the podcast, that AI automates tasks, not jobs, is such a refreshing narrative to hear. And I think there are so many opportunities out there. But as you said, businesses must reposition their thinking and reimagine how to design AI for the human intelligence around it. But more than anything, just a big thank you for coming on the podcast today, and hopefully we'll get to talk again in the near future.
Great, Neil. Thanks very much.
My big takeaway from this conversation is that urgency in which organisations need to rethink their overall approach to AI and moving away from just adopting it and towards a long-term strategic implementation at scale. And I also think it's time to move away from seeing AI as that shiny new tech solution that you can just plug in and forget. If only the world was that simple, right? Because I think we all accept now that it is so much more complex than that. But investing your resources in the right way and helping you enhance that human experience, empower people in complex systems while envisioning and developing new products and services, that is the sexy side of what we're talking about here. So a big thank you to Connor for sharing how business can go about shifting their mindset to no longer just thinking about AI as an automation solution and exploring the art of the possible and what could be. But I do know we have a lot of experts listening to this podcast all over the world. So if you agree or disagree with anything I said or Connor said today, remember I created this platform so you can share your expertise, experiences and thoughts and so much more. So please email me techblogwriter@outlook.com, my website techblogwriter.co.uk. You'll find all the social channels there and nearly 1,200 podcast interviews, whatever it is. Send me a quick message on whatever platform is easiest for you and we'll keep this conversation going. So a big thank you to Connor for taking the time to come and speak with me today. And an even bigger thank you to each and every one of you for committing to tune into this podcast every single day. I appreciate you all more than you'll know. So thanks for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.